All right, time for our all-new segment, 5 Things You Need to Know. And tonight we're talking about the 5 things you need to know about the KDF Amendment Act that's currently before the National Assembly. Of course, the KDF Amendment Act of 2012 revolutionized how the KDF performed and the structures in which that were placed in it. Of course, the KDF being called the KDF after that act passed in after the passing of the new constitution. And here to talk to us about those 5 things is Andrew Franklin, security analyst, a person who himself contributed to the law itself while it was in a drafting stage. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Number 1, Andrew, on 5 things you need to know, the KDF Act 2012 ensured that the law delineates security force roles. Why is this something that people need to know, Andrew?
Well, the Act of 2012 formalized the roles differentiated between the military and the National Police Service. It formally grounded it in the Constitution. Kenya had been one of the few countries in Africa that actually did not have a clear demarcation between what the police force would do domestically and what the KDF would do. The committee of experts obviously felt that with a new constitution it would be necessary to ground the differentiation in the Constitution. And of course the people of Kenya agreed with them on 4th of August 2010 when they voted in favor of the Constitution.
All right, Andrew, let's move on to the second one. The KDF Amendment Bill creates an auxiliary reserve force, including, this is interesting, KWF Rangers, KFS, Kenya Forestry Service Wardens, and the NYS as well, to be deployed internally or externally. Andrew, why is this something that is so important about this amendment?
Well, what's important about the amendment is that it is actually poorly thought out, it's ineffective, it's potentially dangerous, and it will not accomplish what it is supposed to do. The 2012 Act allows the KDF to establish a proper reserve establishment, as do most modern armies these days. This auxiliary reserve force, there seems to be a notion that the forest guards have rifles, the KWS Rangers have rifles. We don't know why the National Youth Service are included. The fact is, though, that having familiarity with firearms to do your job, that is, to act as in anti-poaching roles, to prevent the destruction of our forests, does not necessarily make you a competent military individual. But it also doesn't mean that you have any ability to work with the KDF.
All right, Andrew, basic question here. The KDF's role isn't just in the central role of the Kenya Defense Forces, of course, to protect Kenya from foreign threats, right? But internally it can be deployed to do other things, especially in disaster relief, which is something that is part of the NYS curriculum. Could this be a reason why it was included as part of that auxiliary force?
No, it's not. The fact is that the KDF is allowed to act when there's a natural disaster. It does not require prior approval by National Assembly. When something like Westgate occurred, the National Assembly was required to authorize the KDF to be deployed to restore security. I don't think that we should keep in mind that this auxiliary reserve force can be deployed in support of KDF units operating outside of the country. That is, you can send NYS recruits to Somalia.
Of course, that being very dangerous, given that they have no combat training at all. Now, number 3, which leads on number 2, this I asked as a question: does the KDF Amendment Bill improve KDF's fighting abilities, Andrew?
No. the major question, the first question that I raised when the amendment bill was introduced was, how will this improve the KDF military capabilities? How will it enhance their warfighting capacity? It does none of these things. We saw all sorts of features that seem to allow senior officers to be extended in time, but there is nothing there that actually says we will have a stronger, more effective military organization. In fact,
how about in terms of absolute numbers? We just talked about an auxiliary force that could include the KWS, the KFS, quite controversially the NYS, but in terms of absolute numbers, would this improve the KDF's reserve forces at the very least, which could help us strategically?
Absolutely not. Having increased numbers of poorly trained individuals who happen to have some familiarity with firearms or know how to put on a uniform does nothing to add to national security. What we need are reserve units who are trained to the same standards as our KDF units, so that when we need to defend the borders of this country, we can expand and include additional troops who are trained military personnel.
All right, Andrew, number 4. Let's move on to number 4. I've got 2 more here. KDF will have more leeway to operate within Kenya's borders. First of all, is this a yes or a no? Leeway being they have more wiggle room with respect to their mandate now. Andrew, is this true?
Yes, it is. It is true. In fact, a rather interesting point in the amendment bill is that the National Police Service is not included in the auxiliary reserve force. In fact, they are excluded from any sort of participation in KDF operations. It should be noted that the bill provides that when the KDF operates and mobilizes the auxiliary reserve forces, they also give them military ranks. They become subject to military discipline. The police have been specifically left out of this entire operation, although the administration police were established as a paramilitary organization, which can...
So were the GSU as well.
Well, the GSU are commandos as well, you're right, and the GSU has a somewhat ambiguous role in our security forces, although there's nothing wrong with those troops. They're highly trained, well-equipped, and I would certainly be willing to go to war with them.
Okay, we're veering a little bit off topic now. We're just on number 4. How will they have more leeway to operate inside Kenya's borders? Just explain what the law says about that.
Well, the law says that they will no longer be subordinate to the police, and that they will not require prior National Assembly approval in the event of insecurity.
Sounding fairly like militarization of the country there, Andrew. Is that where we're heading according to your analysis?
Well, I know that the word militarization has all sorts of bad connotations. No, what it means is essentially what we're doing is ensuring that we're not going to implement the National Police Service Act. We are not going to create a modern, integrated police service in accordance with the 2011 law. In other words, internal security will eventually be handled by the Kenya Defense Forces, who are not trained as police, who are not equipped to maintain domestic security, and gradually over time, the National Police Service will become merely some sort of adjunct.
All right, Andrew, let's move on to the last one. This is a controversial one, even for parliamentarians, because they've had oversight, civilian oversight over the KDF. will be limited. That, of course, the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee has some oversight with respect to the KDF. What limitations have been placed in this amendment?
Well, the limitations as to the budget. The KDF will have its own budget line, and we already know how difficult it is to find out how they spend money. It's essentially a one-line item because it's security. More importantly, you know, the armed forces of any modern state is usually the final step you take to implement public policy and achieve national goals. If we eliminate what's not working anyway, but we actually eliminate the possibility rather than strengthen civilian oversight of the military, it means the military can decide what's best for the country and how best to accomplish the country's national security aims.
Andrew, final question from me, and this is an existential one in security circles. Does knowing how much the KDF or any army, for that matter, spend affect national security? Because that's usually been the argument with respect to spending of the Kenya Defense Forces.
Absolutely, it has no effect on national security. What it does do is it hides where the money is being spent. It doesn't tell us whether we're appropriate equipment. It doesn't tell us where we're spending our personnel, our salaries. In other words, you know, the notion of hiding what we spend on a rifle is going to jeopardize national security is not true. The budget, the defense budget in the United States is certainly open to public view. In fact, you know, it has gone over with a fine-tooth comb year after year after year, and to the best of my knowledge, it has not affected our national security.
All right, Andrew Franklin, on our first ever edition of this segment, 5 Things You Need to Know About Tonight, we were talking about a KDF amendment bill currently before the National Assembly. Those are some of the amendments that are proposed. Of course, if you want to know all of them, you need to go and seek out that bill. It's on various websites as well. Thank you very much for joining us from our City Center studios, Andrew Franklin. Of course, the news agenda rolls on here on KTN Weekend Prime. Lots to report in sports news, including the feting of our athletes who did us proud in Beijing and results from the Rugby World Cup. Back in a moment here on KTN Weekend Prime.